Welcome to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee of the Isle of Anglesey County Council. Before starting the committee meeting formally this afternoon, I'm sure that we've all been astounded and frightened by the sad news that we heard on Friday afternoon that Sir David Amess had been murdered doing his work, looking after the people that had elected him. I'm sure that we're all thinking of his family and friends during this extremely sad period. So can I ask you for a minute's silence, please?
Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Iawn.
Thank you. So we'll go on with the agenda. Firstly, we'll see who's present. Councillor John Griffith. Good afternoon, I'm here.
Cynghorydd Gary Pritchard.
Councillor Gary Pritchard. Good afternoon, I'm present. Councillor Dylan Rees. Good afternoon. I'm afraid I have to apologise, Chair. I'll have to leave at 2 p.m. I have a meeting of the Fire Authority. Thank you for letting me know. Councillor Alan Roberts. Good afternoon. I'm present. Councillor Nicola Roberts. No. Councillor Richard Griffiths. Good afternoon, I'm present. We have an apology from Councillor John. Councillor John Arwar Roberts. Good afternoon, I'm present. I'm also here as Chair. Councillor Brian Owen. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here. We have an apology from Councillor Richard Owen Jones. And then the co-opted members. Mr. Keith Roberts. No. We have received an apology from Mrs. Annes Fraser. Mr. Dyfed Wyn Jones. No. Leo Johnson. No. Okay, so we'll move on to members of the executive, the leader. Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Bob Parry. Good afternoon. I'm here until 1:30 p.m. I'll have to leave for another meeting. Councillor Marion Jones. Good afternoon. Councillor Carwyn Jones. Good afternoon, Chair and everybody else. Councillor David Hughes Thomas. Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Richard Dew. Good afternoon. Yes, I thought that I'd seen Councillor Richard Dew. I think I've covered all members of the executive now. So can I ask Mrs. Anwen Davis to read out a list of officers who are present? Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Anwen Morgan, Chief Executive. Dylan Williams, Deputy Chief Executive. Lynn Ball, Rhys Hughes, Vaughan Roberts, Hugh Percy, Ned Michael, Christian Branch, Carys Edwards, Gethin Morgan. I think I've seen Mark Jones, the Director of Resources, Hugh Jones, Anne Holmes. Thank you. Thank you and welcome, everybody. So does anybody have a declaration of interest? Chair, just to be clear, one of the cartrefi cleared that has been purchased is only 3 or 4 doors away from where I live. So I think the best thing for me to do is to declare an interest on anything concerning the small group homes that I cleared. I'll ask the monitoring officer to come in. Yes, I would agree with that interpretation and to declare an interest. It doesn't sound as prejudicial interest. Unless you're having a full discussion on the home near where Councillor Brian Owen lives. So I don't see a reason why you should have to leave the meeting. Thank you for that, Ms Ball. And I also declare an interest. The council is in the process of purchasing a house next door to me in Prosybal. So I declare the same interest as well. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Chair, item 3, the annual performance report. There is a reference to Bwyd Damon. I do volunteer with that organisation, so I declare an interest, but it isn't a prejudicial interest. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Chair. In the same way, I've been volunteering during the pandemic period as well, but I understand that doesn't stop me from taking part in the discussion. I'll ask Ms Ball just to clarify, but that's true for a number of us who have helped in our communities during the pandemic, which is ongoing, of course. No, it isn't a personal interest, and it certainly isn't a prejudicial one, unless you're going to be discussing a specific organisation which you have an interest in. But if it's something more generic, there isn't a personal interest. Thank you for that explanation. Anybody else? No, we'll go on to item 3 on the agenda, the draft annual performance report 2020-21. If I've understood it correctly, we received this report first of all to submit comments on it, then it will be submitted to the executive and then to the full council. Am I correct? Chair, you missed out item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you. I was a bit too keen there to go on to item 3. So the minutes of the last meeting. So I take it that Councillor Dylan Rees proposes the minutes and that Councillor John Arwell seconds them. Thank you for that. Will you all please show that you accept the minutes? Yes, I can see hands up everywhere, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to item 3 now. So the process that I outlined, is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Thank you. So can I ask Councillor David Hughes-Thomas, the portfolio holder for corporate governance, to introduce or present the report? Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank Gethin once again for preparing the report, Gethin and his team, of course. This is the annual report for 2020-21. It is presented to scrutiny today, the executive on the 25th, and then the full council the following day. This is a draft report, of course. It will have to be published before the end of October. That's a statutory requirement. The report gives a valuable overview of what the council has achieved during the year, and of course what we haven't achieved either, which is just as important, so that we can learn lessons as we move forward. Of course, the main aims of the council during this period was to keep the residents of the island and the visitors safe as well as the County Council staff as well, and to ensure that our statutory services could continue. The children's services, the adult services, looking after vulnerable people in our community, the housing service, education, highways, waste, keeping our streets and communities clean, ensuring that the Public Protection Service could undertake its important work throughout this very challenging period. So the council has succeeded, I think, to do the statutory things that they should do, but they've also been doing some additional things, the extras, if you like. It's a very long list, and there's a list in the report. So we have been doing these very important extras for the communities and for the island. I don't have enough time to go through the long list today, but I'm sure that the committee has read the report and has come to their own conclusions concerning these items. It's been a very challenging period for everybody during the last 18 months, and personally, I think that the next months will be just as challenging as they have been in the past. I think it's important to take this opportunity to thank all the officers, workers of the council and our contractors for all the work that they've undertaken. I know that this committee will be asking a few difficult questions, but that's the purpose of the committee. I know that they will behave professionally and fairly as they do all the time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report this afternoon, Councillor Thomas. Mrs. Carys-Edwards and Mr. Gethin Morgan, do you have anything to add? Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll start, and I'm sure Gethin will come in. Just to confirm what Councillor David Rhys-Thomas has just said, of course, I think we all acknowledge that the last year has been the most unusual one in the history of the authority, and it's very easy to forget when we're in the middle of the emergency how much pressure there was on people and services, and it continues as well. But I think that a significant effort has been put in across the organisation. David Rhys did confirm that this is a statutory document. I know that Gethin might have a few additional points. Do you want to follow me, if that's okay with the Chair? Yes, thank you, Carys. Just to note, Chair, as Carys and Councillor David Rhys-Thomas have noted, that this report has to be adopted as a fair reflection of our performance over the 2021 year before the end of this month. And this will be the last time that we have to do that as a statutory requirement. But I hope that you do think that it is a fair reflection of the performance over the last year, and acknowledging that whilst a number of other work areas have come our way in order to deal with the pandemic, obviously it does show you the effect of that response on our performance against the traditional and historic indicators that we've been dealing with. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Edwards and Mr. Morgan. Can I just refer the committee to section 4 of the report, which is attached to the annual report, and the 3 questions in section 4 of the covering report, the key scrutiny questions. The last 18 months have been one of the most challenging for the local authority. To what extent has the pandemic impacted and influenced our council plans, strategic wellbeing objectives and our ability to deliver? 2, 52% of our performance indicators have either maintained or improved their performance during the last financial year, compared to 58% during 2019-20. What factors beyond the pandemic have influenced the Council's impact on timely and effective delivery? 3, this is the last annual performance report before the 2022 local elections. Are there new or different attitudes, needs or opportunities that will need to be considered when preparing the new council plan. So those are the questions for you to consider as you consider the report. So who wants to ask the first question? Can I make a comment, please, Chair? It's Councillor Richard Griffiths. I'm sure that everybody acknowledges the excellent work undertaken by the Council and especially by senior officers. It's fair to say that they have burnt the candle at both ends and they must consider themselves sometimes as well. There is a challenging time ahead of us, but I am confident that this Council will work together through these problems. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Anybody else?
Cynghorydd Dylan Rees.
Councillor Dylan Rees. Yes, thank you, Chair. I echo Councillor Richard Griffiths' words. Just looking at page 13 of the report, where it talks about what the Council has done in terms of creating work opportunities and creating jobs. It talks about how the Council has tried to help businesses during the pandemic, and certainly officers have worked really hard to help to process funding from the Welsh Government. But one of the things that concern me is I've been reading in the newspaper about the fact that a number of businesses have gone out of business during the pandemic because of the effect of the pandemic. Do we have any information at all in terms of how many businesses on Anglesey have gone out of business as a result of the pandemic? Councillor Carwyn Jones. Thank you. Councillor Dylan Rees. I don't have that statistic in front of me, Dylan. I don't know if Christian Branch has any information about how many businesses have gone out of business during COVID. Good afternoon, everybody. No, I don't have that figure in front of me, but I can try and share that information with the committee as soon as possible. Yes, we'd be very grateful if we could receive those facts as soon as possible. It's difficult to have a discussion on this point if we don't have some sort of figures to compare. So I take it, Mr. Branch, that you can do that within the next 7 days. Yes, I will try to get the information and to share it with the committee. Thank you. So we can't make a comment on that. Councillor Dylan Rees, do you have anything to add or any other questions? Not on that point, and I accept that research will have to be undertaken to get that information. But I just thought it would be good for us to have a picture across the island about the situation with businesses who are flourishing, but also those who have suffered and have had to stop trading, so that we can have an overview across the island. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Alan Roberts. Thank you, Chair. Staying with work, I'm aware in Serial that a number of businesses are just failing to find workers to fill in vacancies. This is true in the County Council as well, with a number of departments looking for workers, for example, carers. I think that's a very good example here in education, teaching assistants and so on. So what is the Council doing to recruit these key workers in this extremely difficult economic climate? Mrs. Anwen Morgan, do you want to come in first, and then perhaps Mrs. Carys Edwards? Do we have a number of vacancies in general And then following on from Councillor Alun Roberts' question. Thank you. Yes, it is challenging in this council and in a number of other councils and in a number of other organisations across Wales. As you know, yes, we have vacant posts, but we also have a recruitment process. We use social media. We use different media to try to attract staff. In terms of health and care, that matter has had a lot of attention in the media across Wales, and we're trying to work with partners across North Wales. We have communicated with the Welsh Government, not just in terms of financial matters. It isn't just a financial problem, it's a matter of finding the right people as well. We have written to Welsh ministers as the 6 councils of North Wales to ask if they could ease restrictions and look at the guidelines and to see what we can do on a regional and national level to attract people to this sector. I'll turn now to Caris. Yes, thank you, Anwen. As the Chief Executive has said, this is a problem across Wales in the public sector and the private sector as well. And obviously we are keeping a very close eye on any developments at a national and local level. I'd say, yes, we have vacancies, but no more or no less than usual. The challenge is to identify people to come in and to attract more people to apply for jobs, especially in some sectors, because we're all fishing in the same pond. But as a council, we do pay very competitive wages. We pay the living wage, and not every council pays the living wage. And we do that at the lowest levels of our employment. A number of us across the authority have been looking or working on a specific recruitment campaign. We've been working with Vaughan and Arwell in the social services, and we have organised a recruitment day for next week to try and get people to walk in, have an appointment and have a discussion with us about the opportunities we have. We'll be starting that campaign in Llangefni. If that's successful, we intend to spread that across the island and to hold these recruitment days in different locations on the island. We are making very specific efforts by using the information we have, the local information we have, to help with that work. Although it is a national problem, we need to use local intelligence as well to identify the people who are available for us. Thank you. Thank you, and good wishes with that recruitment day. Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Alun Roberts? No, just a quick comment. And thank you to Anwen Morgan and Caris Edwards for those full responses. Yes, it is a challenging period, and these are national problems. But again, I agree that we need to find a local answer to ensure that we have suitable workers in these important jobs. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question or comment? Councillor John Griffith. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to question 1 under the key scrutiny questions concerning the pandemic and the effect on this plan, the council plan and so on. Under health and care on page 6, there's a reference to Anglesey figures at the time of writing the report, with 92.8 cases per 100k over a 7-day period. And it explains that it was one of the smallest figures in Wales. But the recent figures are much worse. with an example of 550 cases per 100k population over a 7-day period, which is amongst the highest in Wales and the highest in North Wales, certainly. During COVID, we saw some specific campaigns with Two Sisters and in Holyhead to reduce cases. And now with the situation getting worse, and I know that it's, I think it is relevant. This is what's happening now. And we need to ensure that we can show the public that we are doing something about it. So what are we doing to tackle this problem on the island, where the figures are much worse than they were when the report was written? Does the leader want to come in first? Yes, thank you, Chair. It's important to note that the structures in place at the beginning of the emergency still exist. So the emergency team still meets and looks in detail at the figures. We might not meet as often, we might take a week off, but the dates are in the diary if they're needed. There's also a prevention group and different agencies work together, and they include the police, the health service, the ambulance service, universities, colleges and so on. So we do still communicate with each other. The challenge we have is that we are at level 0. So for us as an authority, we have to keep to those guidelines, but there are still some rules in place, and within those rules, public protection does monitor the situation very carefully. There are discussions if you have high level of cases linked to supermarkets and so on. If workplaces aren't complying, public protection do still visit. And since the beginning of September, we have prioritised educational organisations. It's not just public protection, but we have education officers supporting schools as well. Arwell has joined us as the new head of adults. He's taken over from Yola, and he's still in close contact with our external care providers in the private sector. We also have links with health so that we monitor the situation there. I like to look at detail, so I'm a member of this emergency team, and we do receive lots of details in those meetings. So if there is a situation that causes concern, obviously we would respond in the same way as we did previously. Last week we were looking at plans. If we had to undertake mass testing again, how would we respond? Because the challenge we face now is that business as usual is taking up officers' time. So any additional work linked to the pandemic is on top of day-to-day work. And as Councillor John Griffith said, it will be a very difficult winter, but I want to give you assurance that those structures are still in place locally and regionally, and national communication continues as well. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. Anybody else want to add anything? Perhaps I should chair as the chair of the EMRT, and perhaps Dylan would like to come in to talk about the data. Yes, the data is high, but it's high across Wales. When we started this pandemic, anything over 50 cases per 100k would be ragged red. Well, those colours have gone out the window now. Yes, today Anglesey is the highest county in North Wales in terms of cases, but the situation can change on a daily basis. How do we cope with the situation? How do we respond to the challenge? Well, we have internal officers that look at the data every day, trying to identify clusters, trying to anticipate where the problems will be. We share messages on our media through the communication team, and in essence, everybody has to manage themselves and to follow the core rules. And that will be a consistent message over the very difficult 6 months in front of us. We communicate as a team within the council, but we also communicate at a regional level, and to try to see what we can do at a regional level with our partners to protect the public and to stop these cases. I'll turn now to Dylan Williams. Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's fair to say that the goalposts have moved in terms of how to measure the impact of COVID. Perhaps the incidence rate was lower at the beginning of the journey, but nobody had been vaccinated then, of course. Over 53,000 Anglesey residents have had the first jab or both. And if I remember correctly, 4,000 have been given the booster as well. As a result, although the numbers are high, the number of people who need hospital care continues to be relatively low and consistent. So that is the most important thing that we're monitoring, i.e. how many people need care in hospital. At the moment, that hasn't changed, although the cases are increasing. The regulations have changed as well. And by easing the restrictions, it's easier for the virus to spread. There's a very high percentage of cases in schools, but schools continue to be open, although nobody wants to see anybody getting COVID in school. So I think we hope that we will turn the corner sooner or rather than later, and we'll see the figures coming down. But due to the vaccine, although figures are low or are high, it doesn't mean that the number needing hospital treatment is increasing. I'd also emphasise that the Welsh Government has published its winter plan, the Coronavirus Wales Control Plan. It was published last week. It makes it clear what the measures are and how the different measures at a local and national level fit together. I can give you the link to that. It's worth looking at. As the Chief Executive said, we're reaching a point now where two things need to happen for people to look after themselves. The first is to take the vaccine, and secondly is to follow the clear and specific guidelines that are published, and that the responsibility is now on individuals rather than the public sector. And hopefully everybody will take ownership of their own behaviour. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan and Mr. Dylan Williams. Any other questions or comments? Chair, Councillor Dylan Rees. Yes, thank you. One of the indicators that are still red in the report is one concerning the percentage of NEETs, people not in employment, education or training. Can I refer to the second paragraph on page 21? It says,
youth officers work closely with young people who are NEETs once their names are received from Careers Wales. Unfortunately, this year, due to circumstances beyond our control, we were not made aware of many of the individuals until November, when the snapshot was taken. This has been formally raised with Careers Wales. I'm not sure
exactly what that means due to circumstances beyond our control. Can anybody explain what happened? Did it happen in other authorities? And also, no, I'll leave it there for now. I might have a supplementary question. Okay, who's going to respond to that question? Rhys? Mr. Rhys Howard-Hughes. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the comment. It was a problem with how the data was reported and the timing of reporting. Enid Williams has raised the issue on behalf of the Council. and a more effective arrangements will be in place from now on. It did happen in other councils as well. It was just the timing of receiving the data. So that was the background behind the comments in the report. Thank you, Councillor Durand-Rees. And my supplementary question is, how much delay was there before we were aware of the problem and being able to move forward? The exact details aren't in front of me, but we're talking about a few months. So the discussion has taken place and there are more effective arrangements in place, but I think the data was a few months late. And there's also a discussion about what the data represents and which data is most effective to meet the need. And the final question I have is, it says many of the individuals. So how many individuals are we talking about? How many did we lose over those few months? Again, I must apologise, I don't have the data to hand. I'm not sure if Vaughan is here. The youth team have the data, so if Vaughan isn't here, I will find out and I'll pass the information on to you. Thank you for that. So if you could try and get the information to us within the next 7 days, we'd be very grateful. Okay, Councillor Durand-Rees, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Chair, can I just add, in terms of the last question, because social services portfolio holders and the education portfolio holder had the discussion with Rhys and Enid to discuss this issue. It was on the corporate scorecard for Q3 and we did go after the matter. In terms of data collection, there has been a discussion with Careers Wales to ensure that we receive the information earlier, but once the information is received, we needed to ensure that the data was acted upon, so that we did get in touch with the young people. I wouldn't want anybody to think that we didn't get in touch with the young people in question. So once we received the data, Rhys did tell us what happened to these young people, whether they went to college and so on. Some people had moved from the island due to family circumstances, others had had apprenticeship, and others were receiving a different form of education. So we have scrutinised this issue last year. Thank you for that explanation. Any other questions or comments? So can I refer you to the recommendation? The committees are to recommend to the executive that the final version of the 2020-21 performance report should be published by the statutory date of 31st October, and that officers in collaboration with a portfolio holder for HR and transformation complete the said report so that can be published as part of the Council's papers. The Council meeting will be held on the 26th of October. So does anybody propose that recommendation? Yes, I'm happy to propose. Thank you, Councillor Richard Griffiths. A seconder? Yes, I'm happy to second, Chair. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Alan Roberts. So will you please show that you accept the report and the recommendation? Thank you. So everybody accepts the report? Thank you. So this will be presented to the next executive and to the full council before the end of the month. Okay, so we'll move on now to item 4, nomination to the Waste Steering Group with RAP Cymru. So we're going to have a new rapper as a member of that committee, and forgive the pun. The portfolio holder concerning this issue has had to apologise. Councillor Bob Parry, he did have another meeting to attend. Is Mr. Hugh Percy present? Yes. Perhaps you'd like to give us an explanation on this matter. Thank you, Chair. You remember in the last meeting of this committee when you were discussing our quarterly performance for Q1, you looked at indicator 32 on the scorecard, which is the percentage of waste that is recycled. There's a national target of reaching 64% by the end of 2020 and 70% by the end of 2024-25. Our recycling rate has been close to 70% and was on 70% in previous years, which reaches the target for 2019-20, but it has fallen to 64.5% at the moment. So a steering group with the national organisation from Cardiff, RAP Cymru, who are supporting us to look at the reasons for the decline and how we can get the indicator back to 70%. When the executive looked at the corporate scorecard, there was a recommendation from the executive to nominate a representative of this scrutiny committee to be a member of the steering group with senior officers and members from RAP Cymru. And so we're here today to ask for a nomination, please. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Hugh Percy. So you've heard why. And so the only thing you need to do now is to nominate a representative from this committee. Can I propose Councillor John Arwell-Roberts? I'm happy to second. Are you happy for us to put your name forward, Councillor John Arwell-Roberts? Well, I was going to propose Councillor Brian Owen myself.
We're
happy that we have nominated you, Councillor John Arwell-Roberts. Any other names? It must be an omen, you see. The electric has just come back and the lights have come on. So I think that's a sign that the name must be favoured somewhere. So will you all please show that you're happy to have Councillor John Arwell-Roberts as a representative? So that's been passed unanimously. Congratulations and good wishes to you on that committee. You'll be a bit of a rapper from now on, so Councillor Arwell-Roberts. Thank you.
Right, forward work programme.
Okay, the forward work programme. Can I draw your attention? My understanding is that the first meeting looking at the budget, every year we have to wait for the Welsh Government to publish the draft budget. So I understand that the meeting won't be going ahead on the 1st of November. Am I correct? Am I correct, Mrs. Anwen Davis? Yes, just to confirm, following a discussion with the Director of Resources, that there's a recommendation that that meeting is moved to after Christmas. Then we have a committee scheduled for the middle of next month. I can see that that agenda is very heavy for just one meeting. So can I kindly ask you to move 1 or 2 items to January? Just so that we can deal fairly with the officers and the items. And I'll leave it to you as officers to decide which items you can move. But as chair, I think that there are too many items on the agenda for the committee on the 9th of November. Or the 16th of November. If you can move the items I don't want you to create an additional committee just to discuss the additional items. So we've reached the end of the meeting. Can I thank you for your presence and good afternoon to you all.
Recording stopped.
From that.